You're listening to Systemic Error Podcast. The failure was designed.
American Horror Story. Trump officials are lying to their own agents based on an article by Sabrina Hopp. ICD kills 10 lies about it. ICD shot and killed 2 men who were on their way to work, both legally authorized to work in the United States, both not even the agents' intended targets. One died in Texas on July 7, 2026. Another died in Maine on July 13, 2026. In both cases, the same missionary moved first to violence and then to excuse making. This was a decision, not an accident. The key fact is not that agents were confused. The key fact is that federal officers in unmarked vehicles chased the wrong man with guns drawn and lethal force followed. That is not a misunderstanding in any meaningful political sense. It is an operational choice made inside a system that rewards escalation, treats targets as disposable, and assumes the public will absorb the lie afterward. The victims were not abstract collateral. Lorenzo Salgado Araujo has spent more than 30 years building a lie and a construction business in Texas. Johan Sebastian Guerrero was also driving to work when he was killed in Maine. The state killed workers on their morning commute and then tried to narrate them into threats. The real power is in the office above the trigger. The person pulling the trigger matters, but the larger authority sits higher up. DHS, SED, leadership, Trump officials, and the Steven Miller's political project create the conditions for this violence. Congress upped by giving SED another $70 billion on June 10, 2026 after an already grotesque $170 billion the year before. That is not border policy. That is a federally funded enforcement regime designed to normalize pursuit, fear, and deaths. The article is right to name Miller's role, but the deeper point is institutional. When a deportation machine gets this much money, its incentives stop being accuracy and start being throughput. The victims are what a quota-driven system calls acceptable error. This immunity story is a lie. The administration's legal theater is not a side issue. It is part of the violence. SEDs and DHS have been telling agents they have complete federal immunity and that state prosecutors cannot touch them. That claim is false. According to the legal history cited in the source, federal officers are not automatically shielded, and the state prosecution remains available when officers act outside the scope of their duties or unreasonably. That matters because propaganda inside law enforcement is not harmless chatter. If leadership tells armed agents they are untouchable, it functions as a green light. It lowers the cost of killing. It turns the law from a constraint into a story told after the body is on the ground. Here is the point. The source makes clear that the victims saw masked men in unmarked vans and thought they were being robbed. That reaction was not irrational. It was the only sane response to armed strangers in covered vehicles prowling at working people before dawn. The state then weaponized that fear by claiming the men tried to use their vehicle as a weapon, even while witnesses described something much closer to panic and self-protection. This is the ugliness of modern enforcement politics. It depends on confusion. It can later weaponize. First come the masks, the unmarked bans the chase. Then comes the accusation that the target was dangerous for reacting like a human being under armed pursuit. The state creates the terror and then prosecutes the terrorized. Abolish SED, don't send it down. This is not a bad training problem. It is not an oversight gap. It is not one rogue officer, 2 bad stops, or communication failure. ICD is operating exactly as a coercive deportation force is designed to operate when handed blank checks, political cover, and ideological encouragement from above. If an agency repeatedly shoots the wrong people, lies about immunity hides behind secrecy that is then rewarded with more money. The democratic answer is not reform theater, it is abolition. An institution built to meet terror routine does not become humane because a press release says so. The pattern is the point. The larger pattern here is simple. When the state wants to produce cruelty at scale, it first strips the target of protection, then strips state agents of accountability, then strips the public of a truthful account. That is how authoritarian systems work while still wearing democratic language. The uniforms change, the bureaucracy expands. The death are thought to have been the problem. These killings should not be read as tragic mishaps inside a functioning system. They are evidence that the system itself has been made more dangerous, more secretive, and more politically insulated. The horror is not that ICV lost control. The horror is that this is what control looks like when a state decides some lives are acceptable losses on the way to mass deportation. You've been listening to Systemic Error. Thanks to Alternate for today's article with the automated voice of Diana. Thanks for listening.